The EduTech guys present a conversation from our live coverage of FETC in Orlando, Florida from Thursday, January 25th, 2018. Enjoy the program.
Good morning, world. How are you? My name is Jerry Blumengarten, also known as Cybrary Man. What do? I share. I connect, learn, and share with my amazing personal learning network.
Yes. Tom's up.
I'm Tom Whitby, and what could I say after Jerry's introduction of himself? I am an educator of 40 years. Right now, I'm a speaker, an author, a blogger, a podcaster, an owner of Ning sites and LinkedIn groups, and that's it. I connect educators around the world and travel and talk to people all the time.
Yeah. We met at ISTE this last summer.
Yes.
Sitting in the Blogger Cafe.
That's right.
Yeah.
Had a great discussion.
Changed my life.
And that's what I do.
Yeah, that's what you do. That's what you do. So you're just here for the day. Yeah. So what brings you to FETC every year?
Well, just once again, connecting, learning, and sharing with my PLN.
Yep. So your goal today?
My goal today was to connect. My goal was to learn. My goal was to share.
Yep.
I always enjoy Tech Share Live with my good friends Adam Bello, Leslie Fisher, Kathy Schrock, who I followed for, I don't want to say it, over 30 years.
Yeah.
And Howell Davison, because they present such a great show.
Yeah. Tom?
Well, I came to, I'm trying to refocus my energies. I kind of look back recently on my body of work over the last 10 years since I left teaching, and I've been working on connecting teachers, and I question how much things have really changed. I'm promoting change, and I've been doing that throughout my career and more actively in my retirement as I refocused a whole new career in connecting people, and I've come to the conclusion things haven't changed that much. Which I find upsetting and a little bit depressing. I'm trying to figure out why. I'm concentrating more on professional development because my whole goal in this is that if we're to better educate our students, we have to first better educate their educators.
Sure.
And I feel the practice that we've had in presenting professional development to educators over the last 200 years is not effective. I mean, if you talk about anything that educators complain about most, the number one thing would be how professional development is provided to them or not provided to them, as the case may be.
Sure.
So I'm trying to talk with people and refocus myself and get other people to focus on adult learning, adult education, and professional development for educators.
So it's interesting. So Dr. Ken Robinson. Did you catch?
Loved him. I love him every time I see him.
Yeah. Do you think that it's? And I've been thinking about this same thing. Is it's all about training, PBL, professional development for the teachers.
Right.
Do you think it's the speed of how education changes that causes us that problem? Because
it's not education; it's the world.
It's the world, but we keep redefining. We keep adding more acronyms. And we keep redefining what we're trying to accomplish, and it's like we just keep throwing more on the pile.
Well, we are, as much as people don't want to admit to it, we are a tech-driven society.
Oh yeah.
And we are changing at a pace now never before experienced in history. And as educators, we deal with information and learning. And if the information is changing as rapidly as it is, in order to keep up and stay relevant with that information, we as professionals have to dedicate ourselves to changing along with it. I often say that many of us are victims of a 20th century education because today many of our educators are locked into that 20th century mindset, and we're no longer in the 20th century.
Right.
Yet they feel that they have the ability to make a decision whether or not to involve their students in technology and everything around it. And they don't have that decision anymore. At one time that may have been true, but now for a kid to learn in a tech-driven society that changes as rapidly as this, we have to focus on teaching kids how to learn on their own as opposed to what to learn in our world. because our world is not their world. Their world is going to be completely different.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We have to encourage not only kids to learn on their own, but the educators. Why does PD have to come to you? You can create your own PD with so many online great courses, webinars and whatnot, edweb.net. You got Simple K-12. You got all these great tools that you can use. And a lot of them are free.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Same thing with kids. Another thing, we don't let students share their knowledge.
Yeah.
They can teach us a lot of things. They know more about tech than we do. They grew up with the tech.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm very disappointed in the school district where I live, Polk County. I mean, they're just lockstep test prep. They may have technology, but they're not using it. Another thing, we're not teaching them how to use the technology for educational purposes. We're not teaching them about cybersecurity and safety online.
Yeah.
We got to, do these things because, as Tom said, we do live in a digital world. You can't escape that. I was disappointed. I talked to principals, administrators, librarians. They had no interest in being a connected educator. How could you not be a connected educator today in today's digital world?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing to me on that last point. It's amazing to me how many folks we get to sit down and at the end, and we'll do the same thing for you guys. We ask, how can folks reach out to you? How can folks get connected with you? And it's amazing to me how many folks essentially don't have a way. They might sometimes reluctantly hand out their email address, but they don't quote unquote do Twitter, which I think is a hilarious concept, but they don't do Twitter. They're not on any of the other social media.
They don't have a website.
They don't have a website. They basically don't have a modern way for people to get in touch with them. I'm like, okay, well then I guess give me your phone number. I mean, it's amazing to me. And to the point of your about the students, I don't know in your experience, but in my experience, it's amazing to me how many students they're learning way more faster outside of the four walls of the classroom, because if there's something they want to know, they go do it. My daughter, my daughter's 15. She was in her bedroom the other day learning how to tune her guitar, watching YouTube. She dinked with that for a little while and said, "You know what? I think I'm going to try the piano." I mean, which was kind of funny in itself. But I mean, but it was one of those things. She was figuring out, learning how to do that, and I realized, that's actually another side conversation. She's learning guitar off of YouTube because that's not being taught in school.
Well, she's learning in spite of the education system.
Exactly.
In spite of the education.
It's great, and we have to realize too that the smartphones that we all carry, and 85% of Americans now have, it opens us up to learning in a way that's much different than we've ever had to learn before, and it is relevant. I had to change a tire on a Mazda, I think it was, and I had no idea how to do it. I mean, you would think changing a tire is something that we all learn to do, and we all know how to do, and we've done it several times. Yeah. I had no idea where anything was or how to get this tire off of the car. Mm-hmm. And I looked at my daughter, I said, I really can't help you out on this. And she said, "Wait a minute, Dad." So we went to YouTube, and there it was, the explanation, how to change the tire on this Mazda. Yeah. And that is, that's relevant to where we are now, because we can come up with complicated things, and the answers are very simple if we apply ourselves to the research that we have to do very quickly through our phones.
Right.
Recently, my wife and I took our granddaughter to see the Tampa Aquarium, and we got lost, even with GPS. So all of a sudden, in the back seat, my 6-year-old granddaughter said, "Don't worry, Grandpa, Siri is my best friend."
Yeah, I mean...
And then when she was 3 years old, my daughter was taking a shower, gave her iPad. My daughter comes out of the shower, and she says to her, my granddaughter, "Who are you talking to?" "I'm talking to Grandpa." She Skyped me.
They're going to move at this pace because that's what their consumption level is. Their consumption level is much greater than our consumption level. But we never had that opportunity. We were in a field with barley, and that's all we had. Yeah. And that's, we talk about that a lot. Most of these teachers, most of these educators are afraid. If I learned about the Vietnam War in 1980 when I was in school, I had a book and I had a teacher. And no other questions were going to be asked about the Vietnam War. Whatever I learned right then, that's what I learned. Now, hey, what about What about this? Because the kids are looking it up as fast as they can move because they're intrigued by this information and their brains are taking it, processing it, and storing it back. But they're also smart enough to realize, I don't have to remember all this. You know why? I've got the Library of Congress in my hand.
Yeah. Well, another thing that blocks a change in adults, educators. At one time, people used to have a view of what their lifetime career would be. We all did that. So growing up, many educators wanted to be educators. And in order to be an educator and reach that high level of achievement, they had to go through college to get themselves educated. Then they got themselves a diploma, got themselves certified, and then they got the job. Once they got the job, they reached the pinnacle of their career, and they stopped thinking that was it.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that they are going to be in a position that will require them forever and ever while they're in that position to continue to learn. We talk about lifelong learners, and if you look at mission statements in schools across the country, they all say we want our students to be lifelong learners. Well, they ought to include their faculty in that too.
Yes.
It's a requirement and should be part of the job description that professional development will be provided and supported so that educators can be lifelong learners as well as their students.
Absolutely.
We not only have to show them where to find the information, we have to tell them how to evaluate what they're finding. This is good for students, for educators, and whatnot. I mean, they can find anything you want on the internet, but is it valid? Is it true? And that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, critical thinking is probably the most important thing that we have to teach kids so that we don't have a society run by sound bites or tweets.
Right.
Exactly.
As we're starting to see.
Tom, I have a page for all that stuff.
Don't you think that's probably what the enumeration of what's happening currently, socially and politically in our country, the reason it seems to be making such an impact is because they don't know. They can't critically think about the information that's coming to them, and all they can take it is the same. I believe that the North Korean leader making a statement about nuclear weapons to a lot of people is as important as Beyonce's new album, because they do not know how to critically take that information and put it into its separate categories that it needs to be placed in.
Yeah, that's it. There are also, when we talk about policy, for instance, policy requires a much deeper understanding of things than most people are willing to give it. I think that might be, reducing policies in government and policies that control our lives to a tweet or two. It's not helpful. It requires a much deeper understanding of things than people are willing to give it. So unfortunately, our society now is responding to very short tweets, and it seems to be controlling or directing where we're going. And I think we have to give a little bit more analysis of what's going on and use critical thinking to say, there's more to this than this tweet.
Right, and since they don't have that ability, hence the tweetosphere blowing up with just the most redonkulous responses and bad media. It's just. But there's a question, and I see your dilemma. How do we do it? Why aren't we doing it? How do we get to that ability inside public education and education? How do we make that happen? That's
the question.
That's the question.
We've got to find the answer.
I've seen some great stuff here. We had Cameron Hudson on just a while ago. He's a principal at High Plains Community Schools in Nebraska. And he was doing some drone stuff here, but then he did a session on what they've done with social media in their school district using interclass. That was it, I think.
Class intercom.
Class intercom. Everyone can participate in social media for the school. Now, it's approved, but what it created better thinking on, if I write this, it's going to make it to the web on the school, and that's really interesting. Students and teachers, are all blowing up the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook social feed for this school because they've embraced the fact that we need to address this and we need to teach these kids, what's the yellow and the white? Where am I staying at on the road? Where am I supposed to drive?
That's part of that particular school's culture.
Yeah.
And school culture is so important. But Another problem that we're faced with in education is that change happens so rapidly and goes in so many different directions. It draws all of us in many different directions.
Yeah.
That's why I feel we're having trouble focusing on things that we have to focus. You often hear the expression "future ready," and it's driving me nuts because you hear it all the time. And my question is, how can we be future ready when we're not today ready?
Yeah.
Let's focus on today. We're all going off in so many different directions, and technology is taking us that way that there is no focus anymore.
Right.
So let us focus on today and try and address the problems that we have, because believe me, there are plenty of them. There is no silver bullet for helping education.
Yes.
There is no silver bullet because it's too complicated an issue. There are too many factors involved, and we have to focus on those things if we're going to affect change.
Did you have something, Jerry?
I have a lot to say.
Oh,
Very important. I mean, really have to give kudos to the administrators who are here at these tech conferences, who have adapted tech. I remember Eric Scheninger was afraid of tech years ago, and I met him about 9-10 years ago. And now he's a digital leader. He saw the light. And I like the fact that a lot of these administrators are seeing the light, and they're going back to their schools and they're creating an environment where they're allowing teachers to be innovative, to take risks, and not be afraid, and not just doing a lockstep test prep mode.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the problem in schools. They're too lockstep test, and ratings and whatnot. And they're not allowing teachers to teach.
Yeah.
They're not allowing for that student voice either.
Yep.
And we got to change the whole environment if we want to have change the proper way. And we're not preparing kids to exist in the present world. We aren't. They're leaving school. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't know what to major in. They don't know what to do. They're not critical thinkers. They're not problem solvers.
Yeah.
And those are important skills. We have to address that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's the saddest thing I see is when a student leaves and can leave the 12th grade and make a way for themselves in the world automatically. And they exist, and they're doing it. But we never recognize it in our opportunity to help that student even make a bigger splash when they leave K-12. We miss that creative aspect. We miss that dreamer. We miss that, entrepreneur that's going to go out and who doesn't need to go to college, who's already figured out everything in this world. Let's be honest, the technology that exists, to do what I do now and to be to know what I know, I don't need a college degree to do that.
Right.
I mean, I can.
But we don't capitalize on the entrepreneurship of individual students. We don't individualize.
Right.
We standardize. We don't individualize.
Right.
Giving student voice to those kids to find out what they're interested in doing would be very helpful in spurring them on. There's a big difference in kids. Learners in elementary school compared to learners in high school.
Right.
I mean, in elementary school, they're very willing to go along with what it is they're being told to do because they're little kids, and that's what they know.
Class.
That's their world.
Yeah.
Right.
My classroom, the class.
But as they get older, their style of learning changes, their motivation changes, and you'll see that curious, excited learner in elementary school is nothing like the complacent high school student who could give a crap about anything that's going on. And not all of them. It's a generalization. I understand that. But there's suffice to say there is less enthusiasm for learning in the high school than there is in the elementary school. And why is that? Because I think we are not addressing what it is they want to learn about. Certainly we could find out what they want to learn about and what it is we want to teach them and use their interests to teach them the things that they have to know, that we understand that they have to know. So it becomes more of a mentorship than the model that we have of standing in the front and giving a lecture. Because especially when it comes to adult learning, as kids get older, their motivation to learn changes. And we know that adults learn better through collaboration, and the best tool for collaboration is conversation. We're having a conversation right now, so people will be able to listen to this, the conversation that we're having, and hopefully take more from this conversation than they would if we got up here and gave them a lecture about all of this stuff.
Exactly.
And if they involve themselves, if they interact with that, if we had them here with us, they would participate in that learning and own it more.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing that we have to look at as a model moving forward in education. And we're not doing that. We're still doing direct instruction, and we're still doing lecture for 85% of everything that we do. And there's no need for that. It's not as effective as doing something else.
Yeah. Wouldn't you agree, Jerry? I mean, and you've been to a lot of conferences over a lot of years. Wouldn't you agree that it's interesting that we have things like poster sessions now, and we have these hands-on workshops where we're doing exactly what we should be doing in the classroom, but it never makes it outside of the conference? I mean, think about that. The poster sessions are one-on-one conversations about what I'm doing right here, but we never see it make it to the overall classroom.
Tom has always stated that rather than just give that whole presentation, break it up. Give it a little presentation and then open it up, because we can learn so much from that audience. I tried this. Oh, what works? What doesn't work?
Yeah.
That's where you get it's the discussions. That's why I love the Ed Camp model, because those are discussions it's of, by, and for the participants.
Yeah.
That's where even the classroom should be the same way. Tom, they haven't gone to my What Do Students Want page. They haven't gone to my collaboration page. We are also not connecting students to the world outside the classroom enough. There are experts out there. Teachers don't know all the answers. You can go to books, but wouldn't you rather hear from a scientist? Wouldn't you rather hear from someone actually in the field?
Right.
We got to do that. We got to connect to different levels of education too. We're not doing any sharing from the elementary to the middle, from the middle to the high school to the college. We should be connecting all these levels of education.
You know, we also have to respect the learner for what they bring to the table, which is not done often enough, and especially in adult learning. You come to a conference like this, and you've got an expert up there in the front of the room delivering a lecture to a group of educators. Chances are there are 4 or 5, maybe more people in that audience who have as much experience, if not more experience, on that very same topic as the person delivering that lecture.
Yes.
So why not have those people share their experiences and take us beyond what it is that lecturer can do. I often said if I could take all of the information in my head and pour it into my students' heads, they would still not be prepared well enough for the world in which they have to live.
Right.
But we've got to get beyond that. We've got to share experiences. We've got to share ideas. And we've got to teach people how to learn so that when we as educators are no longer around them, they have the skills to do the research that they have to do, to critically analyze that research, to understand what's real and what's not real, and move forward.
We have to figure out how each child and each person learns. We're not doing enough of that. Some are visual learners, some are auditory learners. You have to find out how each kid learns and then give them the opportunity to learn in the way that they are comfortable with.
Yeah, you know, that's exactly when we're talking about this. It's in my brain realizing that to change this is that when we hear a teacher talk about their class, my class as a group, my class as a whole, you know, we've always tried to make education about let's just hit the fire hose and put the whole fire out at once. And I think that's that stepping stone of getting the teachers feel overwhelmed. The teachers feel like there's not enough time in the day to get to that individualized, you know, exactly what's Tom need, what's Jeff need, what's Jerry need, and keep that whole theme running. And we all know that that's where we are. We're no longer in the group mentality. We're in the individual mentality.
But that's also what technology has given us, is the ability to individualize for each and every student. We're able to track what it is they do. I mean, it would be great if every kid had an electronic portfolio that started when they were first graders and it traveled with them for their entire academic career.
I've dreamed over the past 2 to 3 decades. That's what I would love to see that, and we see a lot of companies and services and people starting to think that way. Oh, portfolios are the way to go. Yeah, I mean that's my resume from my life. It's right there online. You can see it anytime you want to, from music to art to writings to the whole bit. And it exists. I mean, G Suite is it. They give it to every school for free. It's right there. Put it on the cloud. It exists.
But we don't have educators trained in the ability to do that.
Right.
It requires a mindset change.
Yeah. Yes.
We've got to have an understanding that yes, this is more effective than what it is we've done in the past. We could do away with grades. We don't need them anymore because we've got portfolios. I mean, when you go for a job, they don't ask you what your grades are. They say, what projects have you worked on that I can look at to understand what skills you have.
Right. Right.
You know,
And in some cases, one of the things that we do where I work, I work for an education service agency, and there are certain positions where it's not just let's look at your resume and you tell me what you can do. There are certain positions we have where part of the interview process is you have to demonstrate. You have to be able to demonstrate that what you say you can do, and that there's not a grade. I don't care. I don't even care what your grades were. I don't care if you made a 1.2 or whatever. You got a degree, great. That doesn't matter. What matters is here is the job that we have. These are the tasks that job requires. Are you able to do a portion of those, demonstrate that to us so that we can evaluate that?
My famous statement is tech gives the quietest student a voice. And I also apply that to blogging. Blogging gives the quietest student a voice.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of these kids won't say anything, but it's also getting them writing. It's also part of a digital portfolio.
Right.
By the way, I have a page for blogging and a page for digital portfolios. and I think, and it's great because you can see the growth in their development and whatnot, and their ideas they've grown all the way through the years. So we should encourage teachers to have kids blog, have kids create those digital portfolios.
We have generations of Americans that are afraid to fail.
Well,
we shouldn't use the word fail.
That's another problem. People have to clearly understand that failure is part of learning. Without failure, you don't learn.
Right.
And we as educators, it's been drummed into us, you can't fail in front of your classroom. You don't want to make mistakes in front of your classroom. And that's not real life.
Right, exactly.
But that's where you need the growth mindset also, and how we communicate is important.
Right.
Can't tell kids he's smart, you're so smart. He comes across something he can't do, he will stop and shut down. Oh, you're doing great, but you can do this and do that to enhance it.
Right. But
it's how we communicate is so important to the students.
Yeah, you're trying to change decades of beating it into them. I mean, we're talking about teachers that were trained by a system that you failed. And if you fail, you fail. And we're talking about making a system that there really isn't a failure.
Yeah. We shouldn't use the word fail. I think
you shouldn't. But how many decades in this country and on this planet have we used fail?
Well, I
know.
Education is what will determine success is what you do with that failure.
It's exactly right.
If you fail and just lay down, you failed completely. If you fail and learned from that and made corrections and are flexible enough to change things and adapt, you will be successful.
Right. But once again, we never did that, and we don't do that in 80% of the schools existing on the planet now. You fail, you fail.
Well, that's why you got to use my learning from mistakes page, because that's what we all have to do.
Jerry, he always has it.
I always refer to Jerry as the Prince of Pages.
And where do I get my pages? From my great PLN, like Tom Whitby.
There you go.
That's the thing I like about going to Tom's pages, because when I'm going to read something, I'm not going to read a paragraph. I'm not going to read 4 lines.
They're so insightful.
I'm going to read a post that starts and ends and gives me meat in the middle of it, and I'm full when I get finished.
That is awesome.
Well, thank you very much for that.
There you go. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I know you guys have other things to do, and I don't want to I don't want to bogart your time, as they say. So most people don't hear that term very often.
That's from the 60s.
That's from the 60s. So, but I want to thank you for coming. If our listeners want to find out more about you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Did I say that?
Yes, I figured he had a page for
you can find me. First of all, my website is cybraryman.com, and you can find me on Twitter at cybraryman1. Someone stole the Cybraryman before me, so I had to put the 1 on it.
Oh.
Yeah, but you are the one that we always think of.
You're
there you
number
go.
one.
You.
That's right. You're the one.
Well, I'm at Tom Whitby on Twitter, and my blog is My Island View, and that can be found on tomwhitby.com.
Awesome.
Yep.
Very
awesome.
cool.
I hope you guys have a great rest of FETC. Yours is ending today, I guess. So you're heading back down to home.
45 minutes away.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Very cool.
I fly back to New York tomorrow afternoon.
Awesome.
Great.
Cool. Well, we're heading out. We're going back to Arkansas. So, we'll be back on the road. And we drove because it was a lot of fun.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I like to see the country. I spent my summers in Tampa with my grandparents. And so I love this part of the country. It's always great to make the trip, see America.
You've been listening to a recorded conversation from EduTech Guys live coverage of FETC 2018. For more information about EduTech Guys, visit edutechguys.com. And Thanks for listening.